vie économique où tout ce qui est reconnu utile a un prix. C'est la plénitude de la vie quotidienne que réclament les femmes.
France ratified the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women in 1983. Through this ratification, it committed itself to combating gender discrimination by setting up mechanisms and legislating to this end. Under Article 18 of the Convention, the state is required to submit a periodic report every 4 years to the CEDAW Committee on measures adopted to eliminate discrimination against women. Civil society is then called upon to contribute to this examination by submitting alternative reports to the committee. It was in this context, and in the context of the submission of France's 9th periodic report, that ASSEDEL submitted its observations to the CEDAW Committee. We wish to draw the committee's attention to 2 major issues in the fight against discrimination against women, by studying the measures in place and their effectiveness. Firstly, we reviewed France's efforts to combat feminicide. The number of feminicides is struggling to fall in France. 2. Since 2018, a woman is killed by her partner or ex-partner every 3 days. This stabilization in the number of feminicides should alert us on the need to strengthen the means of combating these violent deaths, which manifest a continuum of violence against women. France has put in place a number of mechanisms to enable women to flee a violent partner or ex-partner, and to reinforce the effectiveness of law enforcement action and the protection afforded to women victims by the justice system. Firstly, we note that the number of emergency accommodation places, enabling women and their potential children to no longer live with the person responsible for the violence, is insufficient. The investments undertaken by France to increase the number of places must therefore be stepped up. To prevent and thwart feminicide, the justice system needs to win women's trust. The figures show that in the majority of cases, after having suffered sexist or sexual violence, women do not take legal action. The causes are lengthy procedures, refusal to lodge a complaint, even though this is forbidden, and the lack of seriousness or even judgment experienced by some women during their legal proceedings. France must pursue the training initiatives it has undertaken for justice and law enforcement professionals, and penalize the practice of refusing to lodge a complaint. The deployment of the telephone grave danger is a positive step forward in the fight against gender-based and sexual violence. But its mixed results should prompt France to make it more widespread, and to accompany it with an electronic bracelet for the violent spouse or ex-spouse, so as not to place a disproportionate mental burden on the victim, who must protect herself while the aggressor walks free. Secondly, we drew the committee's attention to the mechanisms put in place by France to combat the sexist and sexual violence suffered by women in the private sphere. Such violence is a sign of one spouse's desire to dominate the other and is accompanied by a psychological hold that prevents the victim from seeking help. France has relaxed the conditions of access to protection orders, a tool issued by a family court judge to order the removal of a violent spouse or ex-spouse. ASSEDEL is delighted to see an increase in the number of requests for protection orders every year, proving that this tool is becoming increasingly known by women who are victims of violence. This increase makes it an effective tool that must continue to be widely used. ASSEDEL is concerned about the effects of a law allowing medical secrecy to be lifted when the doctor believes that the patient is unable to protect herself from the violence she is suffering because of the psychological hold she is under. This provision is likely to increase the isolation of women victims of violence and to prevent them from accessing healthcare, as they may no longer visit health facilities for fear of having their medical confidentiality lifted. ASSEDEL is also concerned about France's decision to introduce departmental criminal courts. These courts, set up to relieve congestion in the judicial system, deal mainly with rape cases. They do not include popular juries, and we must ask ourselves whether it is possible to have high-quality restorative justice, which is essential in cases of sexist and sexual violence, with accelerated procedures. Finally, we encourage France to invest in education as a method of preventing sexist and sexual violence. We call for the introduction of a comprehensive and compulsory sex education curriculum, taking into account different sexual orientations, the question of consent, the right to one's own body and the inequalities and violence that exist between the sexes.